Cale adjusted his magnetic boots for the 7th time, the satisfying thunk of the anchors biting into the carbon fiber grating a small comfort. The elevator shaft stretched above and below him, a dizzying ribbon of light and shadow disappearing into the perpetual twilight of the gas giant below. He was alone, which was both a relief and a curse. A relief because his last conversation with the Kthar ambassador had been a spectacular failure. A curse because he was the one who had to fix the harmonic dampeners before the next diplomatic summit. The dampeners were failing, a low, resonant hum vibrating through the entire structure. It was a sound that set his teeth on edge and made the already oppressive gravity of this world feel heavier still. He ran a diagnostic, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. The readings were gibberish, a cascade of alien script and corrupted data streams. He sighed, a puff of vapor condensing in front of his face. "Of course it is," he muttered to the empty shaft. He was a mechanic, not a quantum physicist. But the Kthar had made it clear that their own engineers were too busy preparing for the summit to deal with what they called infrastructure trivialities. Infrastructure trivialities. He spat the words out. The Kthar were a proud, prickly species, a race of arachnid warriors with a complex matriarchal society that made human corporate politics look like a kindergarten squabble. Their ambassador, a female named Vresh, had been particularly dismissive, her multiple eyes narrowing as she spoke of human improvisation as a charming but ultimately crude substitute for proper planning. Cale had bit his tongue, but the insult had stung. He was good at what he did, damn it. He didn't need a lecture from a 6-legged spider-woman about the value of a solid plan. He slapped the panel, a gesture of pure frustration. The hum intensified. Great. Just great. Vresh watched the human from the observation deck, her calicity clicking in a rhythm that conveyed mild disdain. He was small, fragile, his movements clumsy under the high gravity. Yet, there was a tenacity to him, a stubborn refusal to yield that she found interesting. Her matriarch, the Great Slith, had decreed that the summit must proceed. The stability of the spire was paramount, a symbol of the new alliance between her people and these strange, soft-skinned newcomers. The human, Cale, was the only one available for the repair. A low-ranking technician, by his own admission. Vresh had reviewed his file. A decorated engineer, yes, but his species was known for their chaotic energy, their reliance on trial and error. It was an inefficient, dangerous way to approach a problem. She had offered her own engineers, but the summit schedules were sacrosanct. The human would have to suffice. She turned her attention back to the main console, monitoring the summit preparations. The Kthar delegation was already in place, their carapaces polished, their mandibles clicking in anticipation of the talks with the Terran delegates. The summit was a critical step in solidifying the Treaty of Celestial Harmony, a document that had been painstakingly negotiated over 3 cycles. A failure now could unravel everything. A failure here could mean war. She felt a flicker of unease. The spire was a marvel of Kthar engineering, a testament to their patience and precision. To have its integrity compromised by a quirk in the dampeners, it was unthinkable. She glanced back at the human, a tiny figure clinging to the side of the massive elevator shaft. He was tapping at a panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. For a moment, she almost felt a pang of sympathy. Almost. Cale had a plan. It was a terrible, desperate, utterly human plan, but it was the only one he had. The dampeners were failing because of a cascade failure in the primary harmonic regulators. A clean fix would require shutting down the entire spire's power grid, an option that had been vetoed by the summit coordinators. So, he was going to jury-rig a bypass. He jury-rigged things for a living. He pulled a toolkit from his magnetic harness, the clatter of metal on metal echoing in the vastness. Inside were spools of superconducting filament, a portable welder, and a device he'd affectionately nicknamed the kludge box, a jury-rigged power coupler he'd built himself. He began his work, his movements economical despite the heavy gravity. He was a spider crawling up a wall, he thought with a wry internal smile. He attached a length of filament to a secondary power conduit, his fingers sure despite the thick gloves he wore. The heat from the welder bathed his face, a welcome warmth against the biting cold of the spire's upper atmosphere. He was halfway through the bypass when the spire shuddered. Not the low hum, but a sharp, violent lurch. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the maintenance console. Kale's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked up, seeing the emergency doors at the top of the shaft slam shut. A klaxon voice, speaking in both Standard and Kthar, echoed through the shaft. Critical failure. Elevator car 7 has detached. Repeat, car 7 has detached. Kale stared in horror as the massive elevator car, filled with Kthar delegates and human diplomats, began its terrifying, uncontrolled descent. He had to do something. Vresh's world became a symphony of panic. The spire shuddered, a violent tremor that sent her stumbling. On the main screen, she saw the horrifying sight. Car 7, the one carrying the summit's lead delegates, plunging down the shaft like a stone. Her mandibles clicked in rapid, staccato bursts, a sound of pure fury and fear. Her matriarch's voice boomed in her mind, a cold, commanding presence. Kale ignored the venom in her tone. There was no time for pride or insults. The car was falling, a metal coffin filled with people who were counting on him. He saw the problem. The emergency braking system was designed to be fail-safe, but the harmonic dampeners were its power source. With them offline, the brakes were dead. He needed to find an alternative power source, something that could deliver a massive, instantaneous jolt to the braking magnets. His eyes scanned the schematics on the console, his mind racing. The spire's primary reactor was too far away, the power grid too unstable. Then he saw it. A deep space comms array, designed to transmit signals across light years. It had its own massive, dedicated capacitor bank, built to store energy for a single, powerful burst. It was insane. The energy required would fry the comms array for good, but it might just be enough to stop the car. I need to reroute power from the comms array to the braking system, he said, his voice tight. It's the only thing with enough juice. Vresh stared at him, her multiple eyes wide. You would sacrifice the spire's primary means of long-range communication for a single car? For everyone in that car, Kale shot back, his hands already flying across the console. Do you have a better idea? Vresh was silent. She didn't. She had been trained in strategy, in warfare, in the subtle art of political maneuvering. She had never been trained for this. This was chaos. This was the human's world. Vresh made a decision. It was a decision that went against every instinct of her rigid, hierarchical society. It was a decision born of desperation and a grudging respect for the frantic human beside her. I will access the comms array's master control, she stated, her voice firm. You will reroute the power. We will do this together. Kale gave her a sharp nod, a flicker of something, gratitude, in his eyes. They worked in tandem, a strange, six-legged and two-legged team. Vresh's knowledge of the spire's systems was encyclopedic, her fingers dancing across a secondary console, bypassing security protocols and rerouting power conduits with an efficiency that Kale could only envy. He focused on the main console, his kludge box now connected to the braking system, a jury-rigged lifeline. The red lights of the falling car grew closer on the main screen, a terrifying countdown. 10 seconds. Vresh's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the klaxons. 5. Kale held his breath, his thumb hovering over the final activation switch. Now. He slammed his hand down. The spire groaned, a sound of immense strain. A blinding arc of raw energy leaped from the comms array, a visible bolt of lightning that arced down the shaft. The car, for a heart-stopping moment, seemed to freeze in midair. Then, with a deafening screech of stressed metal, it slammed to a halt, mere meters from the bottom of the shaft. Silence. A profound, ringing silence filled the control room, broken only by the ragged breathing of the two survivors. Kale slumped in his chair, his body trembling with adrenaline. Vresh stood motionless, her commissary clicking softly, a sound that was no longer one of disdain, but of awe. They had done it. They had saved them. The summit could proceed. The alliance was intact. And in that moment, as they looked at each other across the ruined console, a new understanding began to form, a fragile bridge built not on plans and protocols, but on a desperate, improvised act of cooperation. The gravity of their world was still immense, but for the first time, it felt a little less lonely.